Welcome, Britt, to the Dating Intentionally podcast. I'm so excited to have you here and to nerd out about brain stuff with you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, so the first question I ask all my guests, and I'm very curious to hear from you, is what are you being intentional about right now, or what do you want to be more intentional about?
Oh, which direction to take that? I'll just be honest. My screen time, my scroll has gotten completely out of hand, and I gotta get better on that. I don't need to get better on that. I want to lead myself in a direction that doesn't make me feel like shit, and scrolling does. So I'm working on
Ooh,
that.
interesting verbiage. Why did you change your phrasing on that?
Intentionally, because we're so good at beating ourselves up. I need to get better about this. And it's like, you don't need to get better. Not about better or worse. It's not about good or bad. It's about how do I feel when I do a thing? I want to feel better when I do things, not worse. But I don't need to be better. Neither do you.
Oh
Neither
my
does
gosh.
anybody.
Literally perfect segue into our topic today. We're going to talk about the inner critic, but I also just want to say before we move on to that, that I also have been working on my screen time and I have set a 90-minute timer on Instagram and Threads, the two that I love. And I will say that most days it does help. And I am, even though I instinctively open it, like after my time limit is over, I will be like, oh, no, I'm done with that. I don't need to do anymore. I'm done. Like,
That's so good. Have you seen the meme where someone was, tell me your best ADHD hacks? And somebody said, tuck your phone into bed and pretend you're kissing it goodnight. And it's night time for the phone. That works.
it works.
It's
I used to do
wild.
that.
It
Yeah,
works.
it really does work. There's so many different tricks, but yeah, it's tough. It's tough, and I really appreciate that you just showed us how we went from beating yourself up about phone usage to no, I'm gonna turn this around and be like, I'm gonna guide myself to using this in a way that makes me feel better. I think is what you said. Yeah. So okay. Amazing. We're talking about the inner critic today. You talk about it a lot in your new book, Align Your Mind, which I read most of. I really like it. It was an easy read. Like I was like really into it. So I'll link it in the show notes. But I want to talk about how the inner critic shows up in dating. And I asked my audience what their inner dialogue about dating is and what the loudest voice in their head is saying. So can I read you a few messages that I got and we can unpack
Please.
them?
Oh, yes.
Okay. And then we're also going to talk about like obviously what the inner critic is, but let's just like show people. So some of them were, it's not going to work out anyway. If that girl managed to find someone, surely I can. Which I don't know if that's a negative, but I thought that was an interesting one.
It's still comparison.
Yeah. This is as good as it gets, and it won't get better because I'm not better. I'm too old, 37, and I'm never going to find someone. And the last one, being single for so long means something is wrong with me. I know. We're just sending you all a virtual hug right now.
Hugs, so much hugs. So many hugs to that. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, what direction would you like to take that?
Well, first, I want to hear your take on inner critic? Like, what is our inner critic? Because I think I just showed people what it is, but like, what is actually going on here?
So here's my hot take on the inner critic. And from the parts work perspective, so my new book focuses on parts work, which is just the idea that we all have freaking multiple personalities. There's 10,000 versions of us, and we want to help them all get along. Listening to everything you said, does that sound like the same aged person? It sounds like that's coming from a teenager, a little kid, maybe someone who's out of college and having a quarter life crisis. So the thing with the inner critic, and here's the hot take, we don't only have one, we have many. It's not what's my inner critic saying, it's how old is this particular critic in this
Oh
moment.
my God. I actually did not realize that. It's like an onion. It just keeps going.
It's so true. I don't think I've talked about this as it relates to dating, and I really
Yeah.
love this topic because if we just think there's this evil entity called the critic who's out to get us, we're either going to believe every word that they say as true and shut down, or we're going to ignore everything they say when sometimes there's a hint of truth in it.
Right.
And
Okay.
the inner critic is not one, it's many. And the question is, how old is this voice that's speaking to me right now?
Okay. So why is that the question? Why does it matter how old these inner critics are?
So pick one of those responses you just read and we'll unpack it. Just pick one and
Okay.
we'll
What
go with
about
that.
the one that really hit me was this is as good as it gets and it won't get better because I'm not better.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how old does that voice sound to you?
Oof. Early 20s?
Yes, that is the voice of the I'm old enough to be semi-independent, but my brain's not done cooking. I have great skin and a high metabolism, but no life experience. And it does feel like the world is caving in on me. All of a sudden, financial crises and rents and marriage and babies and your brain doesn't cook until you're 28. So that voice would sound like, let's say, a 22-year-old.
Right.
A 22-year-old is going to need a different type of care than if that voice was a 6-year-old. So just like you wouldn't talk to a child like you would to a teenager, we need to first know how old is the critic, because then that'll tell us what we need to do next. If I was sitting down with that client, that would look a lot different than if I was doing play therapy with a 6-year-old who thinks there's something wrong with them.
So what is something you would say then if that dialogue is running in your head, if that's popping up?
So the first thing to remember is that we're not our thoughts. Our thoughts are there, but we are not our thoughts. We are the observer of the thoughts. So the first thing I would want, if I was saying that, if I was 22 and I was 22 and I did say that, everything sucks, I suck, nothing is ever going to get any better, I can't get any better. I wanted someone to say, I hear you, it's really hard right now. I wouldn't want someone to be like, shut up, you liar. And if you look at the popular culture, we're told to tell the inner critic to fuck off. And it's like, but that voice is a scared 20-something who's facing a giant world and is overwhelmed. So let's start with validating. Even your inner critic needs validation. Doesn't mean you agree. It just means, hey, girl, hey, buddy, I hear you. It's hard right now.
That's it. Just that validation of it's hard.
Step one, it's hard. And because what I know from working with 22-year-olds, they don't want advice. They get advice from parents, from teachers, from TikTok. What they need is someone to be in the muck and the mess with them. Yes, we're going to give you tools, but let's just start with, this sucks.
You're right. I think when I was in my early 20s, the response I usually got was like, oh, you're so young, like it'll work itself out. Like that kind of dismissiveness of like, oh, but you're 22, like you're gonna be fine. And it's like, okay, maybe that's true, but I don't feel fine, you know?
Or it'll get better. Or it's like, advice is not the medicine when our inner critic is a 20-something. Advice is just not helpful. The first order of business is validate that voice. But we can't do that if we think the inner critic is this evil entity that's out to attack us.
So what does validation do? Why is that the step?
So from a neurobiological standpoint, if I say to myself, shut up, you piece of crap liar, my brain doesn't know that I'm just fighting with myself versus fighting you. And so if I'm in a fight, my brain's going to go, we're fighting, quick, release the stress hormones, because she's going to need all that extra blood flow to her hands and feet in order to escape the lion or beat it up. And so yelling at ourselves releases cortisol. If I say, oh, I hear you, that it's hard right now, I may not feel better, but I have turned the tap off, the cortisol spout, at least for the moment, which is then going to turn my front brain on where my logic is and where all the things that I know are true are. When our logic brain is offline, no advice is getting in. So validation opens the front door files.
So the front door files, what are they going to do at that point?
When a 20-something-year-old has their frontal cortex, front brain online, they can hold the space for both. This is hard and awful, and I realize that I'm not done yet. I realize that I will have choices. If you can hold two truths at the same time, you're going to be able to keep moving, but you can't do that when you're in freak out survival mode brain. It doesn't work.
Yeah, no, it does not work. Okay, I have a question. What was your inner dialogue when you were dating?
Oh, God. I suck. Are you my mother? Everything is crap. How dare you not love me? I hate you. Go away. Come back. Don't leave me. Leave me alone. It was a disaster. I mean, if we're going with classic attachment styles, mine would have been very disorganized in the dating world.
Okay. Yeah. So what would you tell your dating self? Because you're married now, right?
I am. And I got married at 40. So for that 37-year-old who was, it'll never happen. Well, my husband was 49 when we got married. And I remember thinking, what's wrong with him that he's never been married, you know? And he said to me once later on, he said, well, I wanted to not end up divorced once or twice or three times. Not that there's anything wrong with divorce, but he said, I'd rather just wait and have my brain fully baked before I made that decision. And I'm like, oh, that actually makes sense. I was more in the race and hunt to lock it down, get the ring, have the perfect life, and that didn't work. But waiting only increases the odds that you're going to be more skillful when you get there, because you'll know yourself better, you'll know your brain better, and things will just work better. So, yeah.
I'm so glad I did not marry the guy I dated in my 20s. So glad.
So what would I have told my 20-something self?
Yeah, tell me.
She didn't know she had trauma. She didn't know that she was in the middle of a raging complex post-traumatic stress. She didn't know she had OCD. There was no mental health language and no therapy and no internet. I'm dating myself here. But back in my day, the dinosaurs ruled the earth. But she didn't know. So what I would have told her was, you're not crazy. This is hard, but it makes sense. I know you can't know why, but I promise you're not crazy. Because she really thought she was. There's no such thing as a crazy person. And I say that as a licensed therapist. Crazy is not a thing. Mentally ill doesn't mean crazy. Not the same.
Right. That's a really interesting point of view. And I was excited to hear your answer on that, because we all have, from reading your book, we don't all have an inner dialogue. So what is it like if you don't have an inner dialogue? And what is one?
So when we hear the voice that says, you suck, it'll never get better, this is as good as it gets, why did you say that? Why didn't you say that? Why'd you do that? That's our inner voice. Okay. And so the way we talk to ourselves is usually an inner monologue. And
some people don't have this.
It's the wildest thing. But some people genuinely, I don't know what to do with them. I don't treat them, and I make it clear in my book. My book's not for you. It's just silent. I have a family member who has no inner voice. It's just silent up there all day. It's weird.
But it's like, okay, you still have thoughts, but it's like, how do you know? That's wild.
This family member is one of the most intelligent people I've ever met, and a deep thinker, but I don't know how he thinks. It's sort of like a sense knowing versus I hear sentences and words in my mind. I need to dig into this more.
Yeah, that's fascinating. But I think most of us listening probably have an inner dialogue of some kind. And, I want to talk about one battle that I hear very often, which you kind of touched on, because you also talk about how different voices in our head, just like they're at war with each other. And as you're talking about the feeling of the cortisol, and it's like, I'm gonna now fight a lion or something, but not actually. I had that last night. I was up, I was stressed about a conversation I have to have, and I was playing the conversation out in my brain, and I felt so stressed, and I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? We just put it down, and you'll pick it up in reality.
It's double stress. That's double dipping in the stress pool.
How is it double dipping?
Because you're stressing yourself out thinking about it, and then you're going to have that same stress doing it. You can't pre-order your stress and get it worked out before the conversation. That's not a thing.
Oh, I feel called out.
But I do it too. I mean, we all do it, right? I did it last night too. I gave a big speech yesterday, and then at 3 a.m, I'm going over and over all the places where I could have said this better and I could have said that better.
Oh, yeah.
So I know myself well enough. I'm not going to turn it off. I'm not going to just stop, because it's just, if it was that easy, no one would need a podcast or a therapist or any of the things that we have. What I said to myself when I started spinning was, okay, I'm here, I'm listening. What would you like me to know? And eventually it was, am I still okay? That voice got younger and younger and younger. And eventually it was a little 3-year-old that said, do you still like me? And I said, I still like you even when we mess up. And then I was able to go back to sleep.
So what part of you was the part talking to the 3-year-old?
Okay, so disclaimer, no one knows how consciousness works. This has been neuroscientists don't know, philosophers, religious people, nobody, even if you do all the ayahuasca in the world and you're like, I understand the secrets of the universe, that shit wears off, and no, you don't. So all we know, in my work, we call it the self with a capital S. That's Dr. Richard Schwartz's language, and I like it just because it's easy. You can call it God stuff, soul stuff, higher self, Christ consciousness. I don't care. We'll just call it the you that's not your thoughts, the you that's not just the parts of you, not just, but the you that's the grander,
I call it higher
bigger.
Self.
Higher self is great. Yeah. I really enjoy that one because it's sort of all inclusive. Yeah. And so if we're not our parts and we're not our thoughts, then who's the I, higher self or whatever you call it.
Okay, soul. Got it. That makes sense. So back to this battle that I think a lot of people have. I had it, I think you had it, is This battle that goes, I want to find a relationship so badly and I'm running out of time because I want a family, but I also don't want to settle and I have high standards. What are these two parts? Like, is it like a kid and a 20-year-old? Like, what do you think of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I really want a family sounds like an old, 20 something part. Because
Yeah.
legit biology, there is a time limit if that's a thing, if you identify as a woman. So the other one is, but I have high standards and I don't want to settle. I would say, let's examine that because high
Yeah.
standards. I've heard some people say if it's a guy, the guy needs to be 6'4" and make $500,000 a year and wine me and dine me and buy me everything. Or I've heard, she needs to be a 10 and she needs to be this and this and that. I'm like, is that high standards or is that Fantasyland standards? First, we want to differentiate which is which. Because high standards, great. But what does that actually mean?
Well, I want to dig in a little bit more about this fear of settling, this I don't want to settle piece, because that's the other side of the fantasy standards of like, if you don't find a guy or anyone who matches the fantasy standards, you are settling. And it's like,
Right.
are you though?
Well, and is settling wrong? We have this really, really aggressively bad relationship with the word settle, but every
Yeah.
decision that you make, those shelves behind you, which are super cute by the way, you settled on a shelf, you settled on that plant. Like I settled on this sweater this morning. It's a decision, and any decision that you make is going to mean 10,000 possibilities that you didn't make. And so yeah, every relationship is going to be settling. There's not one
Yeah.
relationship you'll be in where you're not settling in some way because there's always other options. So let's make it okay.
Yeah. Why do you think it's so hard for daters to wrap their minds around that? Like, what is really going on there?
It's the FOBO, fear of a better option. If I say
Okay.
yes to this, but what if I could find someone who's this and this and that? And again, it gets into if we're talking parts, there are those younger parts of us that have been brainwashed by romance movies and porn and culture and whatever, and reality TV to say it's supposed to look a certain way. But no, it's not supposed to look a certain way. Relationships should look different for everybody. There absolutely should be here's the standard. Because what's normal and healthy for me might not look the same for you. My husband and I don't share a bedroom. And that's amazing for me because he snores and I'm messy and I like all my girly crap and he's ex-military and very clean. Why should we try to compromise by sharing
Yeah.
a room when we're going to be pissy at each other all the time? But for some people, that might not work. And so the fear of a better option is often a younger part that thinks, I can have it all and the fantasy, and I don't want a human. I want a puppet perfect person that's going to save me.
Right. Right. Yeah. You've said it so well. I love that you guys have separate bedrooms.
It's
That's
fabulous.
cool.
Oh
my gosh.
best relationship hack ever.
Yeah, let's normalize that. I mean, I don't have a situation, but I think it's awesome. I know of some couples who do, and like, why the hell not? Is that what's work for you? Makes you happier, makes you sleep better? Like, I mean, I know the people who do it, it's because of the sleep, the snoring and the
Sleep is so, semi-unconsciousness together in a restless stealing the covers. I want to be cold. He wants to be warm. If you don't have to, why? We have an extra bedroom. So
Yeah.
let's use it.
Love it. I want to shift gears here and talk about how we can start to manage the mess of our minds a little bit and get more aligned. Like your book is called Align Your Mind. Why are we aiming for alignment?
So I use the word align really intentionally because I always think of alignment like your spine or your tires on your car.
Yeah, just
Alignment
set up
doesn't
straighter.
mean fix it. It doesn't mean turn it into something better. It just means make sure everything is in the right relationship to each other. So your car drives smoothly. When your spine is aligned, all of your systems work better. So alignment to me feels more realistic because you're not going to fix your mind because you're not broken. You're not going to banish the parts of you that you don't like because you can't amputate parts of your mind like you could an arm. That's not a thing. I can't tell my inner critic, be gone. I do not want you in my head anymore. That doesn't work. You can't do that. I suppose you can with drugs or a lobotomy, but it's not, the cost of that is way too high.
Yeah, let's not.
Let's just know. But alignment is like, oh, I can do that. You mean I don't have to hate myself? You mean I don't have to try to change everything about myself? I can change the relationship between the parts. That works a lot easier, a lot faster than trying to get rid of parts.
Love that. So let's taking our inner critic, for example, or inner critics. Because we were talking earlier about how you can validate your inner critic. What does it look like when the inner critics are aligned? Like, how are they helping us?
So this is such an interesting shift. So when your inner critic is aligned, it becomes a coach. It becomes a high performance coach. And if you think of all of the best athletes in the world, they still have coaches, because even the top performing people need someone to help them. The top artists in the world and singers have vocal coaches. It's just a thing. Why do we think we can walk around in our minds without any coaching? The coaching doesn't have to come from some, pay me $15,000 a month and I'll show you how to optimize your life. It's more like the inner critic is an untrained coach. And in alignment, that coaching voice knows when to kick your ass, but lovingly, knows when to encourage you when you're down, and knows just when to push and when to pull, just like any good coach.
So, okay, I love this. So what would going from inner critic to coach, what would that look like in dating, right? Like if you're on a date and if you're the kind of person who's like, oh, it's probably not going to work out, what does the coach version of that look like?
Yeah. And I was thinking of what you said about the one that was like, this won't get any better because I'm not better. Is that the gist of it? So what a coach might say is, well, let's look and see how true that is. Right now, your finances are a mess. You can't pay your bills. You drink a bottle of wine every single night. It doesn't mean you suck. It means right now you're not in a healthy state to be attracting the type of partner that you want. So it's not that you need to be better. It's that right now your life choices are not going to create conditions for a really good partner. So let's get up and dust off and figure out what's our options here. And what are you going to do? What are we going to say yes to change this?
Yeah. So that's interesting. It's just kind of like, you are not bad because you are drinking a bottle of wine every night. Like, it's not about beating yourself up. It's about, let's observe this and let's just kind of look at it from a neutral point of view.
How's that working for you is a great question.
Yeah, right. How's that working for you?
A good inner critic who's a coach is going to say lovingly, and I say this to clients, I will never shame a client for any of their choices because it's not my job to shame or judge. What I will say is, well, that was a choice. How's that working?
And then you can answer, hopefully, honestly with yourself.
And if someone's like, I'm fine, they probably wouldn't be in therapy and saying I'm fine. But if you're fine, you're fine. But I don't, But
do you find that in this process of like, how's that going for you, kind of trying to turn the inner critic to a coach, do people justify the choices that are not necessarily supporting what they want? Like, what is that?
I sure did. Oh my God.
Okay.
I co-signed my own bullshit checks for years and years and years.
Tell me more.
That's why I like the idea of a coach, because a coach doesn't enable. A good coach isn't going to say, oh, poor you, you've had such a hard day. You deserve that second bottle of wine. A good coach might say, all right, kid, it's been a hard day. So what we're going to do is we're going to still get in the shower. We're still going to get to the gym. And then if you want a glass of wine while we watch Netflix, assuming you're not sober or an alcoholic, cool. We can do that. A good coach finds a balance between the things. But someone who says, oh, poor you, or for the way I did it, I'll just use myself. Poor me. It was such a bad fight. I deserve to now act like an ass and do whatever I want. That's not a coach. That's a really enabling friend. That's a really unhealthy, toxic, enabling friends.
Understood. But what if you, like scenario here for dating, like, let's just say you're someone who is really resistant to first dates because you get really nervous, anxious, but the coach in you is like, you want a relationship, got to go on the first date. But then it's so easy to just ignore that voice and be like, well, it's raining. I don't want to do that.
So I still get that. It's dark out. It's raining. It's below 72 degrees. It's hard. But that's where the validation piece and the parts come in. So which parts of you are feeling fear? And let's get really honest. If you're not ready to do the first dates because there's too much fear, okay. But then we want to work on the parts of you holding the fear. And then how old are they? A 16-year-old or a 9-year-old is not going to be able to will themselves into going on first dates. It's just too hard. And so if we have younger parts of you driving the car, we have to separate and align them so that the grown-up current day you can cope with the stress of a first date.
That's so interesting. I feel like as you're talking, I'm kind of thinking about how I deal with fear as a person. And I'm more of a feel the fear, do it anyway. I kind of just muscle through things. And it does work for me because I feel like I'm a very confident person because of that. But now I'm like, dude, maybe I'm not handling that the best way. Maybe it needs to be nicer to the parts of myself that feel fear instead of just being like, shut up.
Well, a good coach is going to say, yeah, you're scared. Now get up and do it. And so I don't think you're off course there. I'm that way too. I'll do a quick, is it safe for me to feel the fear? Can I do a quick risk assessment?
Right,
If I'm going to
right,
muscle
right.
through something, am I generally safe enough?
Yes.
Do I have the resources enough? Like I do these crazy I do circus workouts, and they're really
Oh my God, that's
scary.
so cool.
It's so ridiculous, and they're really high up, and I'm terrified of heights. But I'll say to myself, I'm terrified, but have I eaten enough food? Have I gotten enough sleep? Okay, I'm physically safe enough to feel the fear and do it anyway. So
Yeah.
once you've assessed for risk, then a good coach is going to kick your butt into that arena because it is scary.
So this could work for, I think there's a lot of fear of getting into a relationship, right? Like that was me too. When I met my husband and I was like, I think this is a guy I want to get to know more. I think this could be something. I was so scared. I cried. I remember like walking my dog and just being like, oh my God, I like him so much. Oh my God, this is so scary. But like,
Yes.
I did have that moment that you're talking about of like checking in myself where it's like, okay, if I get into a relationship, it's not permanent. I'm not in danger. Like, I'm going to be okay. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
would say, well, which part of you had the terror of death about
Yeah.
it?
Right.
And it
Yeah.
probably was the younger part who has a story of if this doesn't work out, I'm going to end up completely alone. And that
Right.
fear of being alone is actually an inner child fear. It's not even an inner critic fear. When you're in the dating world and I have to find someone or I'll be alone forever, logically, we know that's unlikely. And even if you were, okay, but there's 6 billion of us running around. So it's really hard to be totally alone unless you're actively choosing into that, or
Yeah.
if you're oppressed or under resourced, but we're not talking about that.
Right.
So that tells me that that's a younger part that doesn't know that even if you're not in a romantic relationship, that doesn't mean you're out of luck for love and connection and adventure and all of the other things that are available.
That makes a lot of sense. So we're talking about these parts as if we already know we have them. But what if you don't know you have them? Like, how do you start to identify, oh, this is my child voice and this is my 20-year-old voice and my teenager voice? Like, how do you start to tune in?
So horrifying to me to realize how many years I walked around not knowing about my parts and then wondering, why am I so anxious all the time? Why are my relationships a train wreck? Why are my finances? Why am I hiding my car from the repo people? And so they don't come steal. That was a thing. That was fun.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm like in the woods smoking cigarettes, moving my car around the city. Anyway, I digress. So let's start with you have parts. Assuming you're not one of the people who have no inner monologue
Dialogue,
or whatever. Yeah. You have parts. Great. So the next question is, after any thought that you think, no matter what it is, even if it's I'm awesome, ask yourself, how old do I feel right now? How old do I feel in this moment? You don't have to be like, I feel 7 3/4. Generally speaking, if you tune in, I can tell when I'm in a bitchy, ragey teenager state versus a terrified, hug me, love me, tell me I'm pretty elementary school state versus the world is burning infant state. And it's a practice. How old do I feel right now? Okay, I kind of feel like, probably teens. I probably feel college age right now. I feel really, I don't know, but I feel really, really small. Christmas time and the holiday season, everyone is shrinking in their ages, which is why you can feel like a badass on Tuesday, and then as soon as you go home for the holidays, you feel like you're 12 all of a sudden. Because
Yeah.
we time travel in our minds all the time. How old do I feel is a good way to start identifying your parts.
Yeah. Can I share an example of how I did this? Yeah. So with my husband, again, like, I want to say I'm in a healthy relationship. We still trigger each other. It's part of it. He really doesn't like working out. I don't know what happened in his life that he is completely allergic to the gym. I used to let it go, but I used to be like, hey, like, I want to work out with you. Like, why don't you just come one time? Why don't you just come try yoga class with me? Like, let's do it. And I think he reverted to his like teenage self. And he started going off on how people who work out are stupid. And that, of course, triggered me. I'm like, excuse me. I go to the gym 4 times a week. What are you saying to me? And I felt like a teenager, and that was like our teenager selves were just like going at it.
Most conflict in relationships is teenagers fighting each other.
Yeah,
When
yeah.
you're doing that, that's so buddy. All people who work out are stupid. Aw.
It's like okay. And then I recognized that in the moment. I was like, oh, I am like awakening my husband's teenage self right now, and I'm not gonna carry this conversation on anymore because I don't think we're going to get anywhere. And I was like, okay, and I don't push it. Like, I'm like, okay, that's just who he is. I accept this. It's kind of like your bedroom thing. Like, I'm like, whatever. I just trust you have your health in your own hands at this point.
Oh my, I mean, that's a perfect example of not only do we get to manage our parts, but we're encountering other people's parts all day long.
Especially in relationships and dating.
Especially, no one can trigger me like my husband. And same. But that's okay. I mean, the closer the relationship, the more opportunities.
I was like, does that make him more special?
Yes, you're so special. You triggered me. But he knows enough about, he didn't grow up knowing this, but obviously he's supportive of my work, and he'll help me now if I'm in a state, not when we're fighting, but he might say to me, hey, that sounds like your 13-year-olds. And I'm like, oh. He doesn't take care of me in a codependent way, but he's just used to my shape-shifting. That it's nice when your partner has a common language. Because if I'm feeling really out of sorts, I can say to him, all right, I'm 16 right now. I have no business being in this conversation because I'm going to pop off on you. So I'm going to exit, and I will be back when I return to my right size.
Yes, I do that too, and it is helpful to kind of recognize that and be like, and pause, which I'm practicing a lot. My therapist and I are working on my window of tolerance. I was like, that's a new one for me. Okay, so I'll like pause, like, you know what? I'm gonna just park it here. I wanted to ask you, so your husband, you guys have this shared dialogue of parts work. Okay, so did you have to like get him on board with this? Like, what was his initial reaction to you doing this kind of work?
I don't think he'll mind me saying this. I remember it was funny. He said, well, I don't have parts, but I support you if you have yours. It's like, okay. He's fine. He's cognitively interested because he loves learning. And he's like, this is interesting. I don't have parts. I'm just me. Okay. I'm not trying to convince his parts that they exist, but he supports me with mine, which is great.
That's really interesting. And I love that you said that, because I just want to highlight that it's okay if like your partner isn't like where you are at with something. It can still work really well. Yeah, I love that.
The expectation that our perfect person is going to understand, that's going to meet all of our needs. I've said to my husband many times, I don't need you to understand me. I need you to support me. I need you to respect me. But he doesn't understand all of me. I don't understand all of me. The expectation that you're going to understand all of me when I can't even do that job is just unrealistic.
So if someone's new to this work, parts work, inner work, navigating the mess of our minds, and it's bringing up a lot, where can they start without it feeling like it's all too much?
And people are so good at beating themselves up. So if you're new to parts work and you're already overwhelmed, don't start with the heavy duty stuff. Don't start with your inner critic. Don't start with trauma. Maybe start with the part of yourself that you don't hate. And I've had clients say, well, I hate every part of myself. And I would say that's not true. If you're listening to a podcast or going to therapy or picking up a book, there's no way every single part of you sucks, because there's the part of you who picked up the book or turns the podcast on. Start there. Start with, even if you can only find one teeny tiny molecular sized whatever, start there. Start with something neutral or non-threatening.
What's an example of that? Like what's a voice that could be neutral or non-threatening?
So if you're listening to this, there's a part of you who's engaged and curious and has enough belief that something can change, otherwise you wouldn't be listening. And so, okay, great. Now we have identified there's a part of you that's engaged, curious, and has some hope. Well, what's that like to know that that part exists? Oh my God, I didn't even know that part of me could exist. Well, you're here, therefore it does. So what's that like? Oh, wow. And you'll see yourself start to open. It's like having a camera lens, the aperture opens. It's like, oh my God, there is one part of me that's not totally in everything sucks for all time, always. If you're dating, there's a part of you that believes that there's a relationship available to you, even though dating sucks, even though it's hard. So start with what's working. And I guarantee you there's something. It's very rare that there's nothing in your life at all or in your mind of value.
I love that. I love just start with the neutral, or start with the one that isn't so heavy. And I agree. Once you identify one part, it does open up, and it does start to feel a lot more manageable, and you can start to be the observer, which is so important. I want more people in dating to learn to be the observer instead of acting on every thought and really taking their thoughts so seriously. Yeah.
Absolutely. And asking, or even not even asking, but I've been in conversations with my husband where it's busy. He has no idea. We're sitting on the couches watching TV, and I'm like, I hate you. You chew weird. And he doesn't, and I don't. But I'll say to myself, Oh, interesting that someone just thought that. Okay. I don't know who that is. I'm not going to sit there and do parts work while I'm watching TV at night, but I'll acknowledge, okay, I have a part of me that probably needs me to circle back and give it some attention. But that doesn't mean I'm going to then tell him, stop chewing. Well, sometimes I do because neurodivergent brain. But generally speaking, most of the voices that come up in dating, not all, but most, are first our job to manage, and then we decide how and if we want to act out of them.
Interesting. So acting on them would be.
So let's say something's bothering me about my husband. When he comes home from work, my teenage parts want to ambush him at the door and be like, you didn't do that, and I'm mad at you. That's really disrespectful and unkind. And I have enough parts of me that want to be a respectful partner to know, yes, I understand we're mad at him. And yes, this feeling is valid. And we're going to wait till the guy comes home and changes out of his work clothes, and then we're going to say, are you available to talk? If not now, when? And we're going to get the meeting scheduled. That's how you hear your voices and decide versus just acting from them.
So you're just like, okay, it's like, this is information. This initial thought, this part's information. Okay, cool. How is my higher self going to take that into account? What is my higher self going to do with that? Sometimes it's nothing. Sometimes it's truly
nothing.
Yeah, sometimes it truly is nothing. Yes. And another thing, because you said earlier at the top of the conversation that we are not our thoughts. Another thing you wrote in the notes here that I was really interested in is that our anxiety isn't always lying to us. What? I thought our anxiety does lie to us.
You know, I really don't like the frame. I mean, yes is the short answer, but this idea that your anxiety is a liar, but it's trying to help you. So I was trying to help someone and they just said, you're a liar. Now we're fighting. And because I'm fighting with myself, cortisol, stress hormones.
Okay, got it.
So what if my anxiety has a point? I'm not saying believe the entire thing, but no one is ever going to love me just the way I am. All right, well, let's go with what's the kernel of truth in there. Again, I'll speak for myself, when I was, financially a mess, addicted, just absolute chaos. It's not that I was broken, but nobody of value that I would want as a partner is going to want me in this state. It's not my personality traits. It's the state of my life and my choices. So my anxiety there has a point. So I can take that nugget of truth and say, thanks, anxiety. I'm going to make some choices now.
Was there any part of that where it was like you didn't love yourself and then like that's why you thought no one was going to love you? Or is that part of it as well, like in that state?
The love question is so interesting because the idea that no one can love you until you love yourself.
And I don't believe that, but like, is that, I don't know, you clearly weren't happy in that state or something.
I was not happy and I did not love myself.
Yeah.
But, well, just to speak to that idea, I have so many selves, like lowercase s selves. Mm-hmm. Do I have to love all of them before I can be loved? No. You don't have to love yourself before someone will love you, but you do have to lead yourself before someone can safely love you. Otherwise, it's going to be completely high conflict. I didn't love myself, but my anxiety had a point. And then the next question is, all right, well, if I'm not making choices that make me feel good, well, then which part of me is trying to help me by doing drugs? I'm not saying it's a good thing, but the parts of me that were addicted were trying to outrun trauma and pain and didn't want to feel anything. And so,
right, and that's an option. The best option, no, but it's definitely an option.
It's a choice. It's not a good, and I'm not saying addiction is a choice. I'm saying there is a secondary gain to being an addict. There's no time to feel your feelings when you're high on speed, as I was for a while. Right. So we want to understand what is the job this part is trying to accomplish. And then what am I, higher self, willing to say yes to move myself in a different direction? Doesn't have to be big, but it has to be something.
I love what you said, that someone can't love you until you're able to lead yourself. Is that what you said? Safely?
Mm-hmm. Safely. You can't really be safely in a healthy relationship if you're not leading yourself. Otherwise, you're just going to be, your parts are going to say whatever they say and do whatever they want to do.
So you mean when your higher self is leading yourself?
Yes.
Your
exactly.
lowercase selves.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, got it. It is confusing. It's truly like I'm just picturing the whole Inside Out. And I know you've talked about this on other podcasts. Like it's like this is just basically Inside Out.
Yes,
like,
they should make an adult version. Like here's my inner critic and my saboteur and the parts of me that date unavailable people and the parts that, like we totally Pixar. Listen up.
Was that not a grown-ups version? I felt I related to that so much.
That was the universal version, or they should do a dating version. Here's the part of me that is looking for mom and dad, and here's the part of me that's trying to replace my childhood with some other magical fantasy. It'd be interesting.
So if if our lowercase selves are looking for mom and dad, or like the rescuer, the white knight, the best friend to play with, whatever it is, what should the higher self be looking for in dating?
That's such a great question. I don't think the higher self does the looking. The higher self sort of just leads the charge.
Okay.
But a good question for whichever self we're talking about is, what do you want your relationship to feel like? I know for me, I don't want a partner that I'm working with and living with and sleeping with and 24/7 texting. That's not my style. I want my relationship to feel a certain way, which then is going to tee up a whole different type of person than maybe you. Maybe you want you want to work and play and be best friends and do all of the things every day. Great. But we have to start with, what do I want my relationship to feel like? And it can't be rescue and it can't be saved, because that sets us up for disaster.
Well, yeah, I was just thinking as you were saying that like, okay, you went down the route of drugs, but some people go down the route of relationships to avoid trauma, pain, and dealing with those. Like our younger parts are like just turning to other people to do that
too.
with. Yeah, I mean, I think we all did, do and did. Yeah, I mean, I definitely did as well. That's just something, I think once you see it, you can't unsee it.
So, well, I have a client who's 13, and talk to a 13-year-old about their breakups, and really the world is over and there will never be love again. And I mean, the gut-wrenching sobs coming out of this girl. It's so sweet. And that's her reality. In that moment, that's all she knows. But how often do we, in our grown-up bodies, have a 13-year-old experience in a relationship? But if we don't know that's a teenage part of us, we're going to feel that that's just the absolute truth. And then we're going to make not so awesome decisions from that.
Yeah. Wow. Oh my gosh, Britt, this has been such an amazing conversation. I learned so much from you and your book. I mean, I'm so glad I got to read and then just chat with you, because I feel like I have an even stronger understanding. I'm sure listeners will as well. I want them to check out your book. Where can we find more of you?
Yeah, this was so fun. Thank you. Find me on Instagram at Britt Frank, and Britt has 2 T's, or my website, brittfrank.com.
Amazing. Thanks so much.